Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at on this fine world. And I am Todd DeVoe, the host of Business Continuity Today and the emergency, Director of Emergency Management at Titan HST. As you can tell, I'm still kind of getting over this this cold that I had, and so I apologize if I have to cough. But this is kind of where we are right now. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about, disaster recovery, specifically recovering after an active shooter. And we talk a lot about preparedness, talk a lot about prevention, which are very important, right? When it comes to this type of event. And one of the issues is that we have to be right 100% of the time, where the person who wants to do an act of violence against the organization just has to be lucky once. So what happens? What happens when you have somebody who, whether it's a shooter or a guy who drives a vehicle into your business, like happened over in Germany, or a person who drives down the street into a farmer's market, or into a parade, or all sorts of different types of act of violence, right? How do we recover from that? And that's the tough part. We do response really well, right? Lights and sirens, police and fire, get there, do their job, save the people who can be saved, and then we mourn the victims. And I guess the question after that is, what now? And if you take a look at different places, like in Sandy Hook, for instance, they tore down the entire school, which was a fairly new school at the time. Rightfully so, right? I mean, this is the decision that the community is making together. They're talking about doing the same in Texas. The way they did it in Colorado was a little bit different. All different ways of taking a look at what the issue is and how to recover. But I think the critical step is in this whole entire thing is, how do we support members of our organization? I say this because what you have is, there's a lot of turnover after something like this happens. People don't want to go back to the building. They don't want to go to work any longer. They don't want to work for that company or for that organization any longer, and they resign, move on. Sometimes they can't move on, right? Sometimes people resign, and this act consumes them. I was involved in something a few years ago where a guy went into a beauty salon, and he perpetrated an act of violence against the women that were in there, and two guys. He ended up shot 9 people and killed 8 of them. The beauty salon, they tried to rechange it up a little bit and recover from that. And I don't know if it's still active or not, but I know that they were having some issues there because people just didn't want to go. The building itself is still there. Created a memorial for the victims and put it near the beach, which was very nice. And the community is still shocked by this to this day, in the sense that, it was a small community. It was called Mayberry. They called it Mayberry by the Sea, right? It was such a small town, had a small town feel in a large metropolis area. And that recovery, I think, is still going on because those that were involved still remember the day. They still have mental angst associated with that event, even though counseling was provided, right? And group therapy and things like all the right steps to go through it. Now, what you have to think about, though, is what is your plan specifically on the recovery side, right? What steps are you taking? Who do you have a team that you can call in right away? Now, in the event that I was involved in, we had a crisis response team, mentally crisis response team, on scene within an hour or so, maybe more, after the event occurred. Now we had two sets, right? One group was dealing with the family and community members who needed counseling, and there was another group that was dealing with the first responders who responded to the event. And before we left the scene, we had to check out with a counselor, talk to them, kind of decompress and debrief what we seen, what we did, what was our role, how we were feeling at that moment. Day afterwards, the community came together. Realistically, started planning a memorial in that evening. And so now, not only are we dealing with the crime scene and the aftermath of the shooting, people wanted to come and do a candlelight vigil at the location. So we knew that people were going to come. And so the next evening, it was around 2,000 people that showed up to do a candlelight vigil at the location where the violence occurred. So we had to plan for that and what that meant and how were we going to control the crowd necessarily, not necessarily in a bad way, but like in the idea of like porta potties and things like this and other, when you have that type of crowd coming at a location, traffic control, things like that. And then afterwards, then we had to go and start talking about, the responders again, right? And I can only talk that side of the experience. I can't talk about the side of as a victim. And then what we did then is we had days where we had group meetings. And at first I was kind of resistant to it, right? I was like, hey, I didn't really want to be involved in those group meetings just because I just thought they were whatever. And I realized at the end that they actually do help really a lot. So don't resist them if you're involved. But on the other side of it too is, do you have a team plan? Do you have this plan? Do you have something in your playbook saying that if an event like this occurs, this is how we're going to process it? I think this is the stuff that needs to be written down, and it's not fun to talk about. This is not one that you want to drill in the sense of oh, this is a great practice, if you will, but it needs to be. You need to go through it and like at least a tabletop it and discuss what that means and how you are going to process that recovery. It's not even the physical recovery of the building. We can get, that's a whole nother story, right? But this is the mental recovery after an event like this happens, because as you can see with the things that happened in Buffalo, what's happening in Texas, there's still a lot of issues, angst that's happening, rightfully so, amongst the people that live in those communities. It shocks the conscience for sure. It really, that idea of being safe in your town, in a location that you go to on a regular basis, is questioned. And rightfully so, right? Because the day that you just run to the grocery store and a senseless act occurs, realistically, do you feel safe anywhere? And so how do you build that back up? The idea of safety, the idea that you can go out and do things. And this is where you really need to have the help of mental professionals. Heather Williams, who is great, you can find her on LinkedIn. She does a lot of work on this side of the coin, if you will, with mental health for professionals after a large crisis. I'll tell you this, you can say what you want, those until you've been there, understanding the stresses that put on your body and on yourself after an event like this is tremendous. And some people do okay, right? And there's a story that we talk about that was told, and I really like to share it. It's called The Pebbles in the Backpack. And every time that you go respond to a call, you take a pebble. Some people talk about rocks, but you take it and put it in your backpack. And after a while, that backpack gets pretty heavy. And then that last call that you go on to is the one that breaks your back on it, right? And so the idea is the mental stress. That's that backpack and the pebbles, and how do you relieve that so it doesn't become heavy and break? So, that day, you've seen people retire. This is not the job for them anymore. People that aren't at the retirement age, some of them quit because again, it's just this is not what they could handle. So don't let that happen. I think one of the things we need to do is help each other at this point to become mentally strong, and then also be very empathetic and understanding, um, and look out for uh, what is happening to your coworkers and your responders after an event like this. And this is something that's going to go on for many years. Anniversaries come, things will trigger the memories of the event. There might be somebody on a regular, beautiful, sunny day, and if something triggers them and they're just crying, and it's okay, and the judge is wrong, but to be empathetic and have an ear and to really keep an eye on those that are working for you, that are part of your organization, that are struggling with this issue. The other side of it too is that other events that's like happened these last couple of days will also trigger those that are involved in traumatic events. So again, everybody, just be empathetic and have a plan to be able to get counseling for everybody that's involved in your organization in one form or another. Tabletop it with your leadership, not necessarily with everybody in the organization, and really, really, really have this written down and ready to go in the case of an act of violence perpetrated on your organization. Hey, everybody, until next week, please stay safe, stay hydrated.